Okay, next part to this is going to be developing catalogs of custom data sets for distribution. Now, being able to make a clone of a database, again, let's say an 8 terabyte database, being able to clone that in minutes, that's a very impressive thing to be able to do. Masking it along the way, also impressive. But actually being able to then distribute that to other organizations. You mentioned before we got started, where does the data live? Is it outside of state lines? Is it outside of country lines? So being able to develop catalogs and distribute that data is something else that we need to be able to do, but also to maintain the safety of our obfuscated data along the way. So the end-to-end process that we go with is to profile your data to find where your sensitive data is. And this is something that if you've ever worked with any kind of data quality or data masking tool in the past, the profiling is one of the most difficult parts. What data do we even have that's sensitive based on what our organization does? Secure our data, audit, make sure that we are protected, and then finally deliver. So data profiling. Data profiling is where we are able to look through our unstructured or structured data sets, whether it's your Oracle databases or your XML files or whatever else, and where our software helps you find the sensitive data for you so that you don't have to have your security analysts and auditing and everything else go through a humongous process to look at every column of every table. We have an automated process to profile your data and search through metadata and data and tag it based on the type it is. Find social security numbers, city names, building codes, addresses, first names, last names, and determine what information is sensitive and what needs to be secured. We do this by using what are called profiler groups. These are groups of expressions that help us determine sensitive information based on the regulations you're beholden to. So financial, HIPAA, PeopleSoft, Oracle EBS, these various profiler groups allow us to go in and rapidly find the exact columns or tables that are holding data that may be sensitive based on your regulations. Domains help us classify that data. Are they social security numbers, account numbers, locations, phone numbers? Algorithms allow us to actually mask the data based on various different methods. Secure lookup is one way, picking from a list. If you're in Virginia, well, now you're in Maryland. Segmented mapping, min-max tokenization, data cleansing, etc. are various ways to redact our data depending on the type. A social might go from 593211234 to something else that fits the exact same format. It's realistic, but it's not the real data for that user. But addresses will have to be done completely different. Cities, states, those are done completely different. We can't just shuffle letters around and make an intelligible state name, or I'm sorry, city name. So for those, we may pick from a list. And then on our masking, finally, we do have jobs which actually run these things. Profiler jobs run against your data to find your sensitive information. Masking jobs take that data and mold it and change it into something that's more secure. Certification jobs check to ensure that no sensitive data remains. And then provisioning jobs allow us to copy chunks of that data to other systems. In our data platform, the best way to use our data masking is as a part of our entire data platform, which is where you can, again, provision entire clones of databases using masking jobs that are integrated in, and then mask your data as it's cloned so that you can have a golden copy of secure cloned data to provide to your end users or other agencies or contractors or whatever else. We do have replication capabilities that allows data to be transmitted between systems, locations, or agencies. So we can send data from, for example, if the DMV has a database of driver records, you are able to ingest that data into Delphix, store that data over time, provision virtual databases using those source databases, mask those virtual databases, and then replicate that masked virtual database to another location, somewhere else, to another data center or a cloud, or in the care of another agency or contractor or whatever else. Delphix replication works between Delphix engines. It is compressed and it is encrypted along the wire. Plus, if the data that you're replicating is masked, you're going to have actual obfuscated data at the core as well. And all of this comes together in a really amazing feature that we have called selective data distribution. Selective data distribution ensures that if we have source data that we have cloned with Delphix, we've created a virtual database or virtual application, that we are then able to mask that data and ensure that only masked data is transferred over the wire. Only masked data ever goes from where it is safe in your safe data center to wherever you end up sending it, whether it's a cloud or another department's data centers, or even just another network, another subnet inside of your data center. Whatever the case, we can ensure that when you replicate masked data from one Delphix engine to another, that only data that has been completely obfuscated gets into the hands of developers, testers, QA, or your outside contractors, or even offshore third parties. Selective data distribution works by allowing us to make the clone that I was mentioning before. So we have our, for example, a production database. We sync that with the Delphix engine. We then provision a virtual database with inline masking. We replicate that masked virtual database over to another data center or cloud. And then from there, you can provision virtual databases off of your virtual database, off of a masked golden copy. And again, this is a full copy of everything. This isn't just a subset, 10% of your records. This is a full clone of your source data that's been obfuscated to ensure that the data is kept private, depending on your regulation needs. Again, whether it's names or addresses or socials, credit card numbers, doesn't matter. So this is kind of the technology that brings it all together, is selective data distribution, because it allows us to do redacted replication of our data. So for example, again, if you are the Department of Education and you have a database of student records, those student records are desired by another organization within government or a contractor, we can send them everything we have, but ensure that they only ever see the obfuscated data in the end. And we can do it very quickly. Again, virtual databases are our preferred method, just because we can provision those in minutes. We can be redacting and masking that data in minutes. It doesn't matter how large that source database was. And what this allows us to do over time is build a catalog of data options. Right now, it takes so long to actually create a copy of a database or an entire set of data files. A publishing company I worked for as an example. They had a lot of medical journals and scientific journals and whatever else. And they had over 200 terabytes worth of XML files, unstructured data, containing all of this information. Every publication, a tax bureau may have the same kind of problems with all the publications that they have. It's impossible to clone. There's just too much data there to make clones. And even if they did, it would take weeks. So rather than it taking 6 weeks to provision a copy of a database, 4 days to refresh it, whatever else, if we are able to provision copies of entire applications in minutes, we can create a catalog, an automated catalog of data options over time. Depending on your applications or your databases, we can bring those into Delphix and then collect incremental change data over time and ensure that anything created from that data is masked. It allows you to build a menu of options that you can provide to other agencies or to third parties or to analysts or to someone, they were mentioning using Cloudera, using Hadoop for deep analysis. To get there, you have to be able to get them easy access to your data that's still safe and secure. And you can create that kind of menu of data options with Delphix. So the modern data platform provides us with the capability of profiling our databases. The ability to look into a database that contains sensitive material and look in and say, what is sensitive? How is it sensitive? What needs to be masked? That's step one. Step two is the ability to quickly create a copy of our production data and then mask it in line. Step three is certifying it to make sure that the data that was masked contains no sensitive data whatsoever. Step four is opening up access to outside departments, agencies, or contractors by replicating masked data to them. These are all part of a modern data platform that allows us to actually do kind of the equivalent. If you look at all of the different automation and orchestration tools in the DevOps movement, these allow us to do something of kind of like a data ops. Being able to have a platform that quickly provisions, allows integrated masking, and provides data anywhere it needs to go, those are key operations that have no single platform that can do those things today. There's lots of little pieces. The other thing we need to be able to do is scale this as an auditable process by reducing operational burden. As an example, you've got 5 databases in your applications. You've got an ERP system or a CMS or whatever else you may have for projects that you're working on. You want to be able to provide the data from those databases or even wholesale copies of your applications to another agency or a contractor. You use Delphix's method. You know, you're on the spot. You're doing 5-minute VDB creations and you're masking it in line. And once it's masked, you're replicating that data over. Awesome. And then the time comes where they say, well, we need fresher data. We made a mistake. Someone was doing data analysis and they accidentally deleted something. Or this data isn't exactly what we were looking for. And that just puts the burden of operation right back on you again. As the owner and the steward of that data, you now have to put forth the resources to help them correct those problems. So we want to be able to have some form of self-service to reduce our operational burdens. How can I make it so that if I am the DMV and I have databases storing driver data and I'm providing those databases to outside resources for analysis or whatever else, when they need fresh copies, how can they push a button, get the latest data, but how can I know that it's safe and masked and that everything is as secure as it needs to be? And that is where another piece of our data platform comes in called Jetstream. Jetstream is basically to data as a tool like Git or any other kind of code repository is to developers. Developers have some amazing tools these days. They have ways to have a branch of code, and then if they want to try something new, they want to test against it, they can branch off their code, run tests, run analysis, and then go right back to the main branch. They can rewind their code and all of that. They have these great tools. Data has no such tools. I challenge you, go back home, go back to work, and try to ask your database administrator, hey, I need this dev database rewound a day. I need to look at how the data might have been a day ago. And it's not going to be possible. You're going to see the power of no, as I like to call it. What Jetstream allows is for end users to have control of their own virtual database assets. So going back to the flow of data as we described it, you start with, as a custodian of data, start with your source database. You provision a clone of it that's masked, replicated over to another data center, and developers start working against their virtual databases. What Jetstream does is takes those virtual databases or virtual applications and containerizes them. It's a term that gets heard of quite a bit nowadays. And gives the developer the ability to hit the refresh button to refresh their virtual database from the source. Hit the rewind button to rewind their virtual database to a prior point in time. Bookmark their virtual database and say, this is the point where we hit a bug. This is the point where we released the last version of our software. All of these things together provide our end users with data operations that can actually enable them to work databases like they work code. Now, the cool part to this is, if you have built an infrastructure of masking your virtual data and shipping them only masked data, And if that is done and orchestrated through Delphix's data platform, you can automate this over time. As an example, you have your database, which provisions a masked VDB, replicates over, and you provision dev, QA, and test copies based off of that masked replica. Once a day, automated Delphix orchestration will go in, refresh your golden copy, remask it, and ensure that your developers can press the refresh button and get the latest mask data. All right, so the entire stem to stern infrastructure to do this is built into the Delphix data platform. It's not just a piece of the puzzle, it's the whole thing. Rapid provisioning, masking, replicating, but then also self-service, always guaranteeing access to the latest entire databases, but obfuscated in whatever ways you need. We also have DevOps Readiness through our API, which allows us to integrate in with tools like the chefs and the puppets, monitoring through tools like Nagios, but more importantly for things like Jenkins jobs, to be able to really provide that full build capability. If I want to be able to actually provide entire replicas of my applications as they were a week ago or 5 weeks ago, if you have data archival requirements, it goes beyond just the whole masked idea. Data archival requirements where, because of a regulation, I need to be able to pull up a clone of my application as it was at the beginning of this year. I could be audited at any moment and need to show what my application data looked like on January 1st of this year. Delphix does allow you to actually do that bringing things back from the dead, data archival, because Delphix is storing that snapshot data and allows you to provision old copies in minutes, just like you could a modern copy. Bookmarking and sharing means that data that is currently hoarded and trapped, where a developer or a tester wants to work with their data, we have a system that allows bookmarking and sharing. This is one of my favorite use cases behind Delphix and its self-service capabilities. If you have a developer who has a masked copy of your database, and you have a QA engineer with a masked copy of your database, and if the QA engineer finds a bug as they're going through destructive testing, they can bookmark the moment of that bug, share the bookmark with your developer, and the developer can restore their virtual database to the same exact data point as the QA engineer is looking for. When they are done fixing that bug or whatever they need to do, they can swap branch back to the old development branch they used to be on, and their masked database continues rolling forward and they continue development. That containerization means that your developers are able to actually work through their problems and the other problems they need to solve by branching out their databases like they branch out their code, without using 100 different databases. The data governance, and this is one important final point, the data governance is very important because through all of this, if they hit the refresh button, ensuring they are never going to get unmasked data. If I'm offshoring or using a contractor, ensuring that those developers are never going to see the source data as it was. And that is where, again, like DevOps, there's a part that's dev. I want to have my rapid ability to create databases or to create applications, but the ops part is making sure that the owners set the rules. If the DMV has collected data, if the Department of Education has collected data, they decide what the masking looks like. They build virtual databases that follow different masking rules. They decide where it replicates to and who's allowed to actually see what. So the governance is built into the data platform. And we are running out of time, so we don't need to talk really much about this. This is really just going kind of into that self-service interface of Jetstream. I am available if anyone would like to talk a bit more, particularly about the masking or Jetstream products. We're more than happy to talk about it at the Delphix booth. But Delphix uses this containerization system to truly allow developers full ownership of their data without taking away the ability to govern the database. All right, and we can talk more about that if you're interested. We're right there in the exhibit hall. To recap, that modern data platform enables self-service interface, innovative data controls, and proper governance to ensure that our end users have access to the data, but that they are not able to abuse it. All right? And with that, I am going to ask if there's any questions. Sorry, I know there's a number of topics, but please go ahead.
I understand the reason for masking the data. I understand that. And that masking of the data will be basically to use a different value, but a similar value.
Yes.
If this name, the question is, if this name A is going to always be masked with the same mask, like this name, is it going to always be masked as
Like,
Bill
will
Gates?
Bob always become
Or
Jeff?
Bob will always
Yep.
become Jeff or whatever?
Not necessarily, no. It all depends on the algorithm that's being used, and it depends on which application all of the databases are part of. So that's built into the masking product, where you define what's called a data inventory, and you pick the profile groups and the algorithms that you want to use and when they apply.
And instead of masking the data, would it be possible just to eliminate that data and have an empty value?
Yeah, you can. Your algorithm is basically replace with zero, with null, replace with nothing. That is masking in a way, right?
Yeah, right.
So, yep. Any other thoughts, questions? Any other thoughts from you?
It's good. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all very much for attending. Greatly appreciate it. And again, feel free to stop by and speak with us. Thank you. All right.